make sure that what your parents expect from you materializes. Thank you.
So the luck did not start to manifest immediately, because you've often said that you grew up without shoes, without bags, to go to school. You trekked, as we say in Nigeria, many miles to get to school. You studied under lanterns, there was no electricity, and this child without shoes rises to become the leader of the largest country on the African continent. What do you think those days, those early days of being without, how do you think that shaped then the quality of leadership that you delivered? Did it make you more compassionate? Was there a link? Just sort of walk us through a little bit how living under those conditions, that being your formative years, your beginnings, right poor, and then rising to that level when you then land at your desk on day one as president of Nigeria, did have shaped how you delivered as president?
Definitely it does. Because when you pass through a kind of life history trajectory, from nothing to it all, that's supposed to humble you. So if you see the next child, the next person, and if that person is still low, you should know that if you were able to get up from that level to the big, that child too can get it. That really helps you in terms of your relationship with people. No matter who's there about president, I'm more person, I'm more people. Because I was not born with silver spoon mouth. I grew from the gutter, kind of, in a rural setting. So it was the divine providence that Nigerians wanted for me and become their president. So that humbles you. And that makes you to have that patience to listen to people. And I give properly for taking the decision. And it compared that to probably people that were all silver spoons in the mouth. Some routine that were specially created come and oversee human beings. If I see how some president, even some national government heads, like the Nigeria or Canada state, some of the companies we have the government integrations. Even if you have an idea about what happens in the executive council meeting, it's a monologue. The person at the head alone talks, and after announcing the commissioners or ministers virtually have no input. A couple of my governors was ministers. As the president, then any issue that comes up on the floor of the Executive Council, I expected everybody to interrogate that issue very clearly. There are issues that I even taking a decision, but sometimes a memo is getting late for that. President, I didn't approve it, so that's what I will work on. Something else. But when I think the president approves to me, there's nothing you can do it. But then it must still come to council for ratification. And sometimes when you see sort of a minister tearing that memo, you will something, and that's it. It's allowed so that the minister that brought that memo should know that there were some issues that were not properly done, so that subsequently you do it properly. If you start pressing your conflict, you have to live with it. So you don't just run a system as a president or a governor or a prime minister. You see orders as mere
So, Mr. President, we in UNDP, we support elections, right? We are there all the time to support elections to be fair, free, and stable. And I have to say, as a when elections are being held, the biggest issue is not elections, it's accepting the result of the elections. And there we sort of brace ourselves for conflict, for violence, because culturally, in a lot of these elections, it seems acceptance is a real issue. And then, as a result, we have a lot of instability. Electoral violence on the continent is quite recent. You stood out when you conceded an election before the results. And I think the world was watching because we know that Nigeria is very vulnerable to violence because it's a multi-ethnic society as well, and sometimes elections can go that route. So any little spark could sort of lead to huge violence. But you stood out and you conceded. Can you sort of narrate to us a little bit what that moment was like? What pushed you to get to that point where you say, I'm going to concede, despite the fact that I'm sure there were constituencies, because as a leader, you're not standing alone. That you are representing the party and there's a lot of interest. So I can imagine that there was a lot of pressure. But regardless, you stepped out and you conceded and disappointed, I'm sure, a lot of people who wanted to see it otherwise. So what led you to that moment? What was in your mind? What were you thinking?
Thank you. Just like you mentioned, as a leader, especially as the president of the country, taking decisions are very complicated issues because the decisions you take don't affect only you, but affect so many people. And in a complex country like Nigeria, where ethnicity is always there, religion is always there, when you are taking certain decisions, especially politically related, it affects the people that work with you, it affects the ethnic group, it affects the people who have the same faith with you. So there are so many things. But even at that, a president must take very hard decisions as long as you are convinced that that is in the best interest of the people. Even that decision will cost you personally. When you mentioned the issue of the elections, I think I gave you a copy of my book in Ghana. If you read the section of it, I mentioned what was going through my mind those last hours leading to the elections and for me to concede the vote and call late General Buhari to congratulate him even before the election was formally announced. One thing can guide anybody to take such decisions. First and foremost, is the motive that takes you to politics. Why did you get into politics? On the average, I can say probably more people get into politics because they want to make money. If that is their driving motive for going into politics, then you didn't want to leave the office. You want to We prefer to die there than the office. But if that's not the reason, you want to serve the people, and you notice that things have changed, and if you don't take certain decisions, it will affect the very people that you want to serve. As the president, that the country was very tense. And that to keep this private property. And when I felt that no, it's not about being the president of Nigeria. In line with my slogan during the campaign, that my political ambition to be the president of Nigeria is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. So I have to take that decision to make sure that political like we see what's happening in South Sudan, what's happening in Sudan, and all that. These countries are being degraded because of leadership struggle. And I feel Nigeria should not pass through that trajectory as a nation. And so it was easy for me to take that decision. It was not too pleasing to everybody. And of course, people who work with me suffered because of that decision. But still, I'm happy today that I took that decision. To save the life of people, to protect the investment of Nigerians. And I think people, Nigerians can appreciate me more now than when I was in office. What is the issue of being a president for? Anybody can be a president. But when you become a president, what you leave behind, what people remember you for, that is fundamental. Thank you.
Okay, so, you talked about motive and you talked about, people sometimes going to for making money, but actually a lot of those who end up in these positions have already, maybe yours is an exception, but most of our leaders come from money. And so you wonder, what is the other motive? What else? I mean, we also know about power, right? And I've often wondered how leaders in Africa in particular, where there is a bit of a worship culture, you find that once you get to a certain position, people around you literally worship. And it creates this sense of wow, leaders are actually made by people, and unfortunately in the context of Africa, we revere that make you feel when you stand up. A million people around you stand up. They're literally like, hey, Oga, Igwe, you're sort of there, and does that, how do you resist playing God? How does that make you feel? How do you retain some form of humility despite this worship?
Thank you so much. The introductory remarks mentioned that a number of people who became leaders in our countries, presidents, prime ministers, came from money, which is true. But don't forget that elementary economics, that human wants and initiative. Human wants, nobody earns money and thinks it's enough. So they will expect to get more. You think that they are so rich, that stupendously rich, but to them, they want more. And to me, one key thing about what I notice is there's a slight difference between corruption to make money departments of government. And we will not spend. What is real corruption? If you read this book written by one British journalist, Richard Downing, published in 2008, read the section on Nigeria. It talks about corruption in Nigeria, and I totally agree with it. So, the people who have the privilege of being heads of state, if they are not greedy, they use the resources better to make sure the resources go around through projects and other combinations better. But when they are greedy, one person alone will want 50% of the resources or the income of the country and go and hide it in a bank abroad that he will not even spend the money. So these are the fundamental issues. So, yes, we talked about heads of state or leaders becoming like little gods, deities. Some people like to worship, and maybe that is one of the things that make them completely different. I hate it. I don't like it. In fact, those who have worked with me when I was in office, from the state to the center, and even those who are still working with me, they will know my ways of life. My executive director is there. My medium is also there. I hate a situation where this hero worship, where you begin to worship leaders as if they are not human beings. And that will get into the mind of leaders, and they begin to play the role of God on earth. The kings can play that role because they are, but to me and the mere mortal, I hate it. So that's one.
How would you, I mean, as someone who's been on the other side, and obviously the relationship between the people and the leaders, and sometimes the leaders reinforce, the people reinforcing this sense of, I am God. If you were speaking to citizens, electorally, from that position of power, what do you think people need to do not to play a part in creating leaders who become monsters and who actually mismanage leadership? What is the responsibility of the citizens?
For African society, it's actually difficult for the people. Because it is when we have robust economies in the nation, where people don't need to be close to government to be able to feed themselves, take care of their families, then citizens can be independent-minded. But where you have societies where everybody will go to people in government to get favor before you can take care of yourself and your family, of course, you will fall into the hero worship. Because some of them want that. And if you don't, of course, you will not be accommodated. So you have to do. And sometimes it takes a culture of it. Somebody told me funny to do, I have nothing to do with political election. A man in Nigeria, we know we love titles, chief this, and he died. And somebody wanted to see the man that was the chief or something. I got to the house. The man said, I want to see, let's say, Jonathan. I want to see Mr. Jonathan. Then the wife got shouted at the man, there's no Mr. Jonathan in this house, and banged the door. Because the man did not say chief. So, some of our cultures, we have these praise singers that sing praises to dignitaries and you give them money. It's very common, especially in the southwestern part of Nigeria. So it becomes a part of the system. For us to get out of that, we must develop our economies that people will not need to know the face of the commissioner, to know who is the minister, not to talk about the person. So get whatever he wants to get from society.
Coming to that point, because one of the puzzles that a lot of people feel about Africa is a very rich continent in natural resources, poorest people in the world. And you know, this disconnect between Africa's potential and the opportunity or lack of opportunity for its people, a lot of people tend to ascribe that to corruption. Something you described as pure stealing. You know, so they don't, you know, kind of use corruption as some kind of abstract term. We're talking about people stealing what doesn't belong to them. But maybe let's come to a moment that is a little bit personal here in terms of your confrontation of this issue. Because we also know not all leaders in Africa are accumulating wealth or are there to accumulate wealth. Some have been able to use their leadership influence to fight corruption more successfully than others. In a country like state-level corruption as well, and you have local-level corruption, in your moments of frustration, because, okay, at the time you took office, Nigeria was declared the largest economy in Africa. That means something. But at the same time, multidimensional poverty in Nigeria was greater than anywhere else in Africa. And then, so you're looking at this situation, how did you rein in on those habits and tendencies that robbed millions of Nigerians, hard-working people, by the way, of the opportunity to prosper? What was your biggest challenge in trying to address the issue in a country like Nigeria? How did you, because, you know, the top might not, you know, the person leading might not be correct, but if you have a whole machinery where the stealing is cascading, but is there a role for the man at the top or the woman at the top to put a brake on this? How did you do it? Or try to do it? What did you confront? Is it possible? Is the question. And you're speaking to leaders now. Let's say you're, you know, presidents who have just come into office are listening to you. They are facing similar situations. What steps do you think, in hindsight, as you reflect on maybe some of the things you succeeded on and some of the things that you failed on? In hindsight, what is the secret of addressing this issue on the African continent?
Thank you. Of course, you raised the issue of maybe of our GDP level and the level of poverty. Of course, the issue of corruption. Even when I was in office, there were some scandals about corruption. Maybe trying to put diplomacy, you don't want to ask me directly. I would love that you ask me directly so that I can give you some perspective. But a number of issues. First and foremost, yes, Africa is a rich continent. We see potentially rich. That the resources will not create wealth for the people until you are able to exploit. So we must be able to add value to our resources and export them. And then we go to those countries to struggle for jobs and they treat us like our beloved. So I don't see Africa as a rich country because we've not been able to convert what we have in our natural environment to means of actions. And yes,
President, in the case of Nigeria, and what were the issues?
For example, yesterday, when I mentioned briefly that first and foremost, there are two levels of poverty. The multi-dimensional poverty, that was people are extremely poor. These are most cases Christians, people who have no skills, probably not even educated. And for you to make sure that you get out of that level, you must look at what dominates the local economy in the various areas and encourage us. In Nigeria, we are a agrarian society. And that is why we did very well in agriculture. If you interview Akin, the president, the president, he will tell you what it is. It was continue. So Nigeria, we are known for crude oil. We export crude oil, then we import petroleum products. This is not ironic. We export the crude oil. Then we go to other countries to import aviation fuel, we import EMS for our cars, we import kerosene. So we started encouraging that we must have refineries. The government refineries were all broken down. We tried to reactivate them, that was always a problem. So the only thing is to encourage the private sector. And we started the journey. Now, that would say, in fact, Nigeria is no longer importing petroleum products. We started that journey. And we didn't do much in the solid mineral sector. Maybe because there were too many, we changed the ministers too frequently. But that was my directive to any of the ministers at that point. We cannot continue to export raw material. Go to Nigeria, go to a state like Zamfara State, where the poverty level is quite high. Out of school, population is quite high. When I was in office, about 70% of children were not going to school. So you can see the level at which people were operating. But we have goals. And people from other nationalities, from what you see, are just using the locals to steal and sell it out. So until we are able to exploit our own resources, add value to our own resources, and export finished produce, we cannot just claim we are rich. That is clear. Then when we talk, maybe you talked about issues of corruption in Africa. Yes, though sometimes some of these corruption issues that we read in the papers are somehow blown out of proportion. Let me give you an example. To me, when I came into office 2011, I signed the Freedom of Information Bill into law, passed a law to give journalists and civil society free access to get any information you want to get from any department of government. Somebody who wants to be stealing money will not do that. So that if you hear anything and you wish to go anything, you are free to go. And if the government official fails to give you that information, it's a criminal offense. We did that. When we were to celebrate 2010, when we were to celebrate 50 years of our independence, 50 years of Nigerian independence, there's something I do with my cabinet, probably my government, called Africa, Alter States of Nigeria, and talks about all kinds of things like that. It's the British journalists that have been covering Africa since 1975. But it talks about Nigeria, life in Lagos, corruption in Nigeria, and so on. First, and you also. Yes, I said it. Then I asked them to read a section on Nigeria, especially from Richard. So I told them that this program is, we'll have a conference like this, but we are going to invite that man to be the keynote speaker. And my own minister said, President, no. That this man that finished us, no, it cannot bring it. I said, the man did not finish us. We must invite him, let him come and speak. Let us know the perception of people about some millionaire perception of people. Let us not deceive ourselves. Well, as executive president, I first come my ministers. We invited that man. Then I also invited one lady, a white lady from South African journalist that wrote a book based in Korean politics. This is our tongue to chop. You know this lady, Michelle, yes, wrong, as one of the panelists. Kenya and Nigeria have some similar attributes in terms of certain things. And my ministers were looking at me. I said, they must come. We must interact with them. And we had a conference. That said that when they got the invitation, he was surprised that probably the president is inviting him so that the president will hurt him because of what he wrote about Nigeria. But this is my mind. So, it was totally committed So they can't eradicate corruption completely, but should be able to reduce it to the level that it will have society. And there's one country that has done well recently, is Rwanda. The Gambia is doing quite well in terms of that. I did not succeed like that. I know during my government there was this scandal, which was not political. Raised an alarm that we lost $49.8 billion between January 2012 and July 2013. That's the period of 1 year, 7 months. $49.8 billion. That's probably $50 billion. And the income, the oil income, I don't think when the IOC, the auditors remove their own and so on, what the government and cannot do that. I think that's a lot of money. Later on, when there was so much talk about it, it changed it to 12 billion, later it changed it to 20 billion. So even if it was, so everybody talks about the 49, but the 12 billion is later mentioned and 20 billion later mentioned. The Senate has to investigate and using consultants. The senators is and they didn't see the money. The government has to use PWD, that's what they have to audit. And consultant has to say that here NNPC cannot properly give proper account of about $1.48 billion. The query that they not say it was stolen, but in terms of documentation and so on, it will be proper. But the story is that under Jonathan, the country lost $50 billion. I remember that year when we had the conference in Africa and Europe, EU, the one went to Brussels. Of course, Angela Merkel, then the Chancellor of Germany, asked me for a bilateral. So she invited me. So I have to go there with some of my ministers. And immediately we got in, she did not even allow me to sit down. Said President Jonathan, that Nigeria lost $49.8 billion. I didn't believe that. I said, well, Your Excellency, you know, Germany, the economy is quite strong. So 49.8 just got 50 billion. So the economy is strong. So if you lose $50 billion, you will not notice it. But in Nigeria, if we lose $50 billion, the federal government, the state government will not be able to pay salaries. So she just turned around and said, well, even in Germany, $50 billion is a lot of money. And ended there. So people will just hear some of these figures. But when you go into this, it is not quite correct. So yes, there's corruption in Africa, there's corruption in Nigeria, no doubt about that. But some of the stories are not absolutely correct.
So that said, we're talking in this governance meeting about trust, right? And what is it that makes building trust possible? What is it that allows a social contract between the state and society to happen, even in the midst of all the stories? But I think the biggest story for people is their daily experience. It's what they experience, not necessarily what they read. You know, you come from an oil-producing part of Nigeria. I happen to have gone to school in that region. And I remember, this is college, times when we would see the gas flaring in the region. This was at Abraham. And yet we didn't have power to study. This is what I would walk away with. You know, it's like there is extraction happening right here in front of me, but the dividends are not impacting my life. This is the story that people have that creates the sense of mistrust. Whatever the facts are of the story, the fact is people are not experiencing the benefits of the resources that they see daily being extracted, even sometimes from their communities. And this is Africa over, whether you're talking about DRC, or you're talking about South Sudan, or you're talking about Nigeria. And today, when the world has gone transactional, we're now talking about, will African leaders, in negotiating, say, critical minerals, which is in high demand by many parts of the world, vote for their people? Will they negotiate on the basis of the interests of their people, or will there be once again a selling out of the resources of the people? So these are questions that obviously relate to governance, but I wanted to take the opportunity to ask you maybe a final question, and then I will open up to some Q&A. We know that you have established the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, and you are also part of this mediation force under the elders. Could you share us maybe some behind-the-scenes story where your identity as a former president made a difference in a tense mediation? African leaders need most to be effective peace builders today. We're looking for jobs for former presidents so that we can actually lead. So if you can sort of give us some insights on life after the presidency, and what you would advise those who are in power, contemplating, maybe also conceding, what qualities they would need, or what opportunities are there for them to continue to make their legacy.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of things. I hope I'll be able to cover all of them. Anyone that I don't agree with, some other person can ask. But the key thing is the word trust. Relating to the activities of the former president, relating to leaders and the citizens of their country. Trust is not something that you can impose or even use holy books to deceive people. People look at you and look at your family. Maybe you have children that are just in their 20s and they are driving the best cars, doing hitting people, killing people, spraying money in crop crops and so on, living a very kind of lavish life. And you were a government functionary, be it a president, be it a governor, be it a minister, whatever. And you expect people to trust you. Nobody will trust you. So your lifestyle will attract that trust. If people don't believe in you, they will not trust you. And it affects relationship between leaders. You could talk from morning till night. For example, probably when you are in office, all the tables you take to the right. You have left office as the president, you go to another president and say, please, these tables, don't take everything to the right, spread it. That is hypocrite. He said, I should give you some life examples. I think Moyo is here. When we had some issues in Guinea, when Alpha Conde wanted to amend the constitution after finishing his first 10 years, I wanted to amend the constitution for another 12 years, and there was so much tension in the country. They, through the NDI, came to that's so low for us to go. They mobilized us for us to go and I remember we had a lot of it. At the point, Alpha Conde was very angry. And you know what he said? He said, for Jonathan, yes, I can understand. But you so low, you can't talk to me. When you're in office, you did this, you did this, you did this. So you remember certain things that Siglo did. Somebody is much older than us. But he said, you cannot tell me this because you did things worse than this. So in in fact, because of the way a leader lives his life and the circumstances around him, can make it easier for you to solve problems. Look at this, in the last election in the Gambia here. We came under the platform of West African Elders Forum. When the results were announced, the country was tense. That night, it was about 11, between 11 and 12 or so. We get the signal that the youth from the opposition have gathered in the house of the opposition leader, and they want to mobilize that night to create havoc in the city of Banjul. So, what do we do? And the security were everywhere. So if these youths move out in that night, they will clash with the security with weapons. Definitely there will be few deaths. We have to move to the person's house. And when we got there, we saw the sea of young, angry people outside the house. But many were walking in that night, and they were talking to themselves, who is that? No, President Jonathan, President Jonathan. The hearing that of President Jonathan alone calmed the atmosphere. About that at least we've gone to listen to them. And this is the man that will surely say the truth to government, because past through, we had a conversation with the leader, we were able to convince them to dispatch the youth. So sometimes the personal reaction, we went to the Botswana election. Botswana, the ruling party that just lost the election was there for 58 years. From independence, only one party that was able to rule. And before the election, they said the president had left. I said, Jonathan, well, you were the president of Nigeria. So that's what I said. I don't exactly remember what I did in Nigeria. So in one way or another, sometimes people even say that. But sometimes just seeing you and remembering what you stand for brings some kind of calmness in them. So definitely, the issue of trust is critical for leaders and even for the interaction with people generally. I don't know what other things you raise. The gas flaring and things like that in Nigeria.
No, that was just like a side comment to buttress the fact that people want to see the impact of good leadership on their lives, on their daily lives, and that's what builds trust. If they see change happening because of leadership, but if they don't, if it doesn't affect their daily lives, it's no amount of data you give them or conviction will change their minds. I just want to, as we start to conclude this hour, to give, if you allow me, Mr. President, to give the chance to the audience, given what you've heard, any reactions. And I will give the chance to 2 or 3 comebacks here. Do we have a roving mic? Can you please give a mic to the gentleman in
and I'm a senator in the Nigerian parliament. Mr. President, let me most profoundly say I'm so proud of you. Your opening speech has actually made our days here. Mr. President, recalled when you were in power, I was in the Senate, and of course, the Deputy Senate leader. We had majority both in the House of Reps and in the Senate and in the sub-nationals. That means we had more governors, almost 22 to 21 governors, and almost 473 local governments out of 77 from Nigeria. My question has to do with this scenario of most leaders, particularly in Nigeria, having what you call in the Nigerian parlance cabal. This cabal are defined as the inner caucus of most head of states or president in Nigeria. And there was this rumor that if the cabal had known you are going to concede to the president, we had this rumor that you would have been drugged so that you would be sleeping for 24 hours. And therefore, there is no way you concede. Secondly, we heard that there was this rumor that they make it almost impossible for you to come out and address the Nigerian nation while conceding. Mr. President, my question is, did you foresee at that material time that there are some interest groups within the presidency and outside the presidency that had that ambition, and therefore you did a fashion them and quickly concede even before the formal announcement of the official results? That is one angle. The next question has to do with the aftermath. I'm concluding. Mr. President, is there anything that still agitates your mind that you would have actually accomplished as a president, that day in, day out, you keep thinking about it? What specific things will you not share with the audience that you wish to accomplish but did not? Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished Senator. Thank you. Luckily, we are in government at the same time. You are still there, but I've left. In terms of my concession, there are so many stories about it that were not quite right. In terms of the issue of cabal, I don't know, Nigeria, that word cabal has now come to stay in our political vocabulary. But there is nobody who will hold a very high office, even in the private sector, that don't have some key people around him. No matter how knowledgeable you are, you need people to sometimes give you certain suggestions, sometimes look at something differently. So there's absolutely nothing wrong in the president having some key leaders that he can, not everybody will easily have access to the president. In one way or the other, he may have some friends, some old colleagues, and so on. The problem we have is that, and that's why we use this name cabal and put some kind of negative connotation to it, because they advise and their suggestions to their own benefit. If they are advising the president or the prime minister on general things that will bring benefit to the public, nobody will frown. But why should the president have a cabinet of ministers? They're all cabal, because they meet in the executive council to conspire about how they will run the country. But it's just a larger cabal. So, yes, so presidents have that. I don't really have a cabal by definition. But yes, some elders, some people senior to me, but the government before me who have seen it all, from time to time seen me to make suggestions. And that is normal for everybody. I remember there was a time I was talking with the first military governor of the whole River State, King Jstv, who was the governor at the age of 24. When he called some of his commissioners and directed them to do certain things, they will turn at us, my son will not do it this way. Yes. So you have those kind of who are senior to you that sometimes can help. So there's nothing wrong. And there's no cabal that confused me. That day, I remember vividly that I called General Buhari. Results were coming in. Then I witnessed an incident that happened at the National Election Center when Elder Rubebe was presenting me, challenged Jiga, the chairman of the National Independent Electoral Commission. And it was very bad, and people said the country would go into crisis. We witnessed all that. So there are some of my aides, some ministers were there with me, some of my aides were there. and people were talking random. I couldn't even talk. I was just listening to people. Everybody is making one selection or the other, and so on. I remember Ngozi was there, the finance minister there. Attorney General, I think, was also there. Dudafa was there. This vehicle minister then. Shidoka was also there. So I listened to everybody who was talking. So at a point, I left them and entered to my study down. And I called the control to link me up with President Buhari then. I didn't even tell them. So they linked me up, then I congratulated Buhari. So after that, I came back to join them, and they were still talking. And I said, well, gentlemen, no need to talk again. I congratulated Buhari. So then Chidoka, I said, President, have you done that? I said, yes. They said, can I tweet it? I said, go on and tweet it. So it was Chidoka that tweeted, and it went viral. So the stories of Kabak pushing left and right, I don't think it was quite correct. There was something like that. Then you ask whether there are certain things I would have loved to do, but I couldn't do. Yes, I was there for 5 years. So definitely you cannot exhaust what you love to do for your country. But I don't need to lament over such issues. The people who have taken over will continue to run the country the way they see Nigeria will continue to look at them and make their own selections. I don't want to begin to lament over what I would have done differently or whatever. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Former President of Nigeria. And I've actually been personally looking for this opportunity to exchange with you on some of the experiences. Okay. I know that the focus of this conference is about governance, and limiting that to elections would be quite simplistic, which I wouldn't want to do. But just to emphasize the point that when you were in the government, I'm sure as a leader, you have usually concerned yourself with policy making, but the implementation, I think when we talk about governance, we need to basically look at how civil service is quite sufficient and efficient enough to undertake certain policies that you've been able to implement. How do you deal with some of the challenges within the civil service to ensure that they're able to take up certain policy initiatives that you initiated during your tenure for implementation?
Thank you. I think yesterday we had the permanent secretary from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he's not here today. Well, sometimes, yes, the civil service, people claim, could affect the performance of government. And no, that, you know why in Nigeria they call it the civil service? The private sector don't have civil service. The civil service is to make sure that political leaders, be a governor, be a president, don't make mistakes. And that is why you have the bureaucracy in the civil service. In the days the civil service was the civil service. If, for example, a country or a state want to handle a big project, it could be an engineering project, build house or bridges or road, first they will pass all those things through the people engineers, level 9, level 10. Then escalate to the principal of engineers, level 12, chief engineers, 13, 14.